Hello, hockey fans in Canada and the United States. I'm going to give you a bit of bad news here for those of you who have been watching the games that I've uploaded in the Calgary Vancouver series from 1994. I've got a little announcement to make in regards to Game 7 and some struggles that I'm having. So, the 1961 Rome Convention on Intellectual Property stipulated that sports broadcasts would be protected by copyright for 20 years from the date of broadcast. The NHL has decided broadcast copyright limitations do not apply to them when and if they say so. While they are allowing most old games to be posted online, and in some cases claiming any monetization, which is fine with me, I don't need to make money from people watching these games as people see fit basis and not on a per-click basis. Any per-click views of the games, I would have no problem with the NHL taking the profits for those. This isn't about making money. This is about the ability of fans to share league history. Not recent history, but distant history. 30 years or more ago in this case. However, the NHL has decided that key games and plays in NHL history are proprietary, and they are blocking the fans that made everybody associated with the league wealthy from seeing those games. The NHL does not provide an alternative option to watch these games on their monetized stream or anywhere else for that matter. They have simply blocked the games, such as the 1994 Game 7 Calgary versus Vancouver game, from being shared by the fans who are interested in hockey history and nostalgia. Now, as somebody with a degree in history, I used to work with a museum in British Columbia and had a similar fight with museum brass regarding old photographs and films they held in their archives. They literally had tens of thousands of old photos of the town that they represented in storage, and I and some others were volunteering to make those photos freely available to the public online via the museum's website and various free media hosting platforms. The management of the museum refused to release the old photos, claiming they were property not of the community and the taxpayers who paid for their storage and upkeep, but of the museum itself as a kind of quasi-corporate entity, and insisted old photos should be individually licensed to persons willing to pay for them, despite the fact that they were all clearly legally in the public domain. The claim was that this was a key source of income for the museum, and they didn't really care whether they technically were in the public domain. They had no intention of releasing them to the public freely, even though the public paid for their sustenance. Although when the financial records were reviewed, it was revealed photo and film licensing accounted for something like 0.0001% of the museum's income, so almost completely negligible. Most of their money came from taxpayers, the same taxpayers who paid to make sure the history of the community was preserved and accessible to them, and the same taxpayers that they were now blocking from getting free access to the history of the town they funded and built. What was happening as a result of museum policy was that 99.999% of these old photographs and films sat in binders and boxes in museum storage and were never seen by people. Entire generations were living and dying without ever seeing these super cool and important glimpses of their own history. And now the NHL is doing something very similar. Not only do they make next to nothing on the rights to these old games in terms of a percentage of their income, even when they had their quote-unquote vault, which had a very limited selection of usually poorly transferred old games. But the majority of the old games that exist on tape, mainly from the 70s to the 2000s, during the VCR era, the NHL does not even possess copies of. Most of these games only exist on tape because the fans had the foresight to record them on videotape. Otherwise, they would have been lost to history forever. The league did not preserve the games because they did not think there was enough financial motive to do so. So fans did it. Now, of course, there were a handful of games that they did preserve. Now, even though copyright law stipulates sports broadcasts are only copyright protected for 20 years, the league wants those rights in perpetuity. And for whatever reason, YouTube is working with them. And whenever the NHL says, we have a copyright on that game that might have been played in like 1930 or something, YouTube is going, oh, okay, and completely ignoring the Rome Convention, which said sports broadcasts are protected by copyright for 20 years. So what the NHL is doing is something known in law, in my opinion, as copyright abuse, claiming they have a copyright when they don't. But in any case, even though I can't post this game, I've tried doing it many different ways. They seem to have a clever script in place to prevent it from being posted, and marks that as proprietary and to be blocked in all countries. So there's currently nothing I can do to get this game online. I am contesting the blocking of this game by citing the 1961 Rome Convention. I don't necessarily expect any positive results from that. I'm not sure how this can be resolved or if it will be resolved, but we will continue to push the NHL to let go of old games like this. It is the right thing to do, in my opinion. Please support our efforts to retrieve and make these old games available to the public before the tapes all deteriorate or disappear, which I suspect the vast majority of tapes already have. Time is of the essence here. These tapes of games that the league did not store are deteriorating and being thrown away daily. There is no time to waste. We do not dispute in any way the NHL's right to retain broadcast and copyrights on new games, and even within the 20 years worth of games that the Rome Convention stipulated. But after that, these games should be gifted to the fans who have made the luxurious lifestyle of pro hockey players possible, not to mention the management. We do not ask for much. Please join me in pressuring the NHL to not engage in what is essentially copyright abuse by squatting on old games. And by that I mean they're sitting on them. They're not making them available. It's not like you can go out and buy these games somewhere or pay for the right to see these games somewhere. You can't do that. They're just squatting on the rights. Rights that I'm saying they don't have. And so I'm calling this copyright abuse. I think it's extremely unfortunate and harmful to the most devout hockey fans for the league to essentially squat on these old games until entire generations pass away, just like with the museum. Entire generations pass away from old age or whatever without ever getting to see these old games. The league just sits on them until the videotapes that they're stored on turn into dust and are lost forever. So I'm suggesting we could make some sort of fan NHL agreement. Let us put the games older than 20 years online in congruence with the law, and the NHL can benefit from our labor by monetizing the games for the league. This can all be done in conjunction with YouTube. So, Gary Bettman, please stop being greedy. We all know that it's not a coincidence that ever since you became commissioner, no Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. At least not since you have been in full control of the league. When you were hired to be commissioner halfway through a season, that was the last year that a Canadian team won the Stanley Cup. When you were in full control the next season, and for every season up to today, no Canadian team has won a Stanley Cup. Canadian teams used to win Stanley Cups regularly. It's mathematically against the odds. Canadian teams should win Stanley Cups mathematically, at least once every 10 years. At least, probably once every 5 years, based on the number of Canadian teams. But no, not a single Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup since Gary Bettman came in and swore that he was going to make the game more popular in the United States. And at the same time, he and the league are essentially obliterating NHL history and holding back memories that we could all access, and in many cases that the league itself doesn't even possess. They're anti-history or something. So yeah, Gary, please stop being greedy and stupid and disrespectful towards your greatest fans. And to the audience, thank you for paying attention, and again, support our efforts to bring old hockey games to hockey fans everywhere. I will go on to transfer a series that I kind of forgot even happened, and that was Calgary versus Vancouver. Now, I remember that the Canucks played Calgary. I remember that the Canucks played Toronto and, of course, the Rangers. But I didn't remember that they played Dallas. So that's the next one on my list. The NHL blocking old games like the one that was supposed to be here instead of this rant is a clear case, in my opinion, of them cutting off their nose to spite their face. The rights are not that valuable, and it is an attack on their most devoted fans. In any case, we will continue trying to move the NHL. We would prefer not to go to court, and I think there is a sensible solution. So thank you, and enjoy the games we are able to post. And if you can, please support our efforts.